Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Destiny Pharma Annual General Meeting. Throughout this meeting, attendees will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just please simply type in your question and press send. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. I'd now like to hand over to Nick Rogers, Chairman of Destiny Pharma. Good morning.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the annual general meeting of Destiny Pharma PLC. I'm Nick Rogers, the chairman of Destiny Pharma, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. I'm joined by my fellow directors, Peter Morgan.
Morning.
Neil Clark and Sean Claydon.
Morning.
In a circular convening this meeting, we told shareholders that they were not entitled to attend this meeting, and that anyone attempting to attend the meeting would be denied entry, and that only the minimum number of shareholders or their proxies or representatives required to ensure the meeting is quorum would be permitted to attend. Shareholders are strongly encouraged to appoint the chair of the meeting to be his or her proxy for the meeting, so their voting rights can be exercised. It's now just after 11 AM, and as we have a quorum, I declare the meeting open. The quorum comprises me as chairman and shareholder, and I have 15 proxies I hold for various shareholders. Peter Morgan, a non-executive director and shareholder in the company, and Neil Clark, the chief executive, and also a shareholder in the company. Please note that following the conclusion of the formal proceedings of the meeting, there will be a presentation by Neil Clark, chief executive, followed by question and answer, and you're encouraged to ask questions through the chat as you've been directed to. I'd like now to start the formal proceedings of the AGM. The notice of AGM, which should appear on the screen shortly, together with the explanatory notes, was posted to shareholders and made available on the company's website on the 4th of May 2012. Accordingly, the requisite notice of the meeting has been given. I propose, therefore, that the notice of meeting should be taken as read. The voting today will be conducted on a show of hands, and it will be those people in the room that will be showing their hands. May I remind you that ordinary shareholders who are present here in person are entitled to one vote on a show of hands. A proxy who is present and has been duly appointed by a shareholder is entitled to vote, also has one vote on a show of hands. The results of the voting will be announced through the Regulatory Information Service and published, along with a number of proxy votes on each of the resolutions, on our website as soon as reasonably practical after the meeting. We will now proceed to vote on the resolutions, which I will formally propose to the meeting. The full text of each of the resolutions is set out in the notice and is up on your screen at the moment. Resolutions 1 to 7 are proposed as ordinary resolutions and require a simple majority to be passed. Resolutions 8 and 9 are each proposed as a special resolution, which to be passed require a majority of 75% to vote in favour of the resolution. Unless the meeting is otherwise minded, and as the full text of each resolution is set out in the notice of meeting, I don't propose to read the full text of any resolutions before asking you to vote on it. So, I'm going to move to Resolution 1. I propose that the annual report and accounts for the year ended 31st December 2020 and the accompanying auditors, strategic and directors' reports be received. Those in favour, please raise your hands. And I get a second vote as proxy for those people who sent me proxies. Those against, I have a proxy against, so I will raise my hand to note that as well. So I declare the resolution passed by the necessary majority. So I move now to resolutions to re-elect directors who are retiring by rotation. Resolutions 2 to 5 concern the re-election of Neil Clark, Dr. Bill Love, Peter Morgan and Wai-Jing Peng, who retire in accordance with the articles and, being eligible, offer themselves for re-election at this annual general meeting. The board is recommending that Neil Clark, Bill Love, Peter Morgan and Wai-Jeng Peng be re-elected as directors. So resolution 2, I now propose that Neil Clark be re-elected as a director. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? I hold no proxies against, so I declare the resolution carried unanimously. Resolution 3, I now propose that Dr. William Love be re-elected as a director. Please raise your hands to vote in favour. Those against? I declare the resolution carried unanimously. Resolution 4, I now propose that Peter Morgan be re-elected as a director. Please raise your hands to vote in favour. And those against, I hold some proxies against that resolution, so I have to raise my hand. However, I declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. I now propose that Dr. Wai-Jeng Peng be re-elected as a director. Please raise your hands to vote in favour. And against? I declare the resolution carried unanimously. Resolution 7, the board is recommending that Crowe UK LLP be reappointed as auditors. I propose therefore that Crowe be reappointed as auditor and that the audit committee be authorised to fix their remuneration. Resolution 6 deals with the reappointment and resolution 7 deals with their remuneration. So resolution 6, I now propose that Crowe be reappointed as auditors. Please raise your hand to vote in favour. And those against? I declare the resolution carried unanimously. Resolution 7 is to fix the auditor's remuneration. Please raise your hand to vote in favour. And those against? I declare the resolution carried unanimously. So we now come to resolution 8, which relates to the authority to allot shares. I propose that the directors be authorised to allot shares in accordance with the terms set out in the 8th resolution in the notice of AGM. And you'll see the summary down on the screen now. Please raise your hand to vote in favour. And those voting against, I hold some proxies to vote against this resolution. So I declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. And the resolution 9 is to disapply preemption rights. This must be passed as a special resolution and requires a majority of 75% in favour. I now propose that the directors be authorised to disapply the statutory preemption provisions in accordance with the terms set out in the 9th resolution, which are set out on the notice of AGM. And you will see the summary at the bottom of your screen on the slide now. As this is a special resolution, 75% majority will be required. Please raise your hands to vote in favour. So those in favour, please raise your hand to vote against. I hold some proxies to vote against that. However, I declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. Right, that concludes the formal business of this meeting. I thank you all for your attendance and interest and declare the meeting closed. The results of the meeting will be announced to the markets through the Regulatory Information Service and posted on our website as soon as practical. We will now follow this with a presentation from Neil Clark, the Chief Executive of Destiny Pharma, and you will have the opportunity to put any questions to Neil through the chat again, or the question and answers. Please write your question and press the send button. And I'm going to pass across to Neil.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I will move on now to company presentation. And as hopefully many of you already know, what we're looking to do at Destiny Pharma is developing new medicines, new drugs that prevent serious infections. And as we referred to in these presentations, of course, the experience of the last 18 months, say, of the pandemic has highlighted the global need for better approaches to fighting a whole manner of infectious diseases. And Destiny is really well positioned with its late-stage pipeline, but also its earlier research programs and focus in this space. So really excited about the opportunity, which unfortunately, I guess, as we've learned, is driven by a clear global need, patients suffering, but also as a business, there is also very interesting commercial opportunities, which we believe will drive the increase in value in Destiny as we progress our assets. So as you know, we have 2 late-stage clinical assets, both under an IND in the US, so a clear focus there on the US. They're both eligible for fast-track status and targeting clear markets, large markets, which we believe can deliver good product sales and good market penetrations, which again will drive the value and the performance of the company. So XF73, which has come out of our own XF platform, is to be used as a nasal gel to prevent post-surgical infections caused by a bacteria called Staphylococcus aureus. And as we were very pleased to announce at the end of March, fantastic phase 2B results from that program. And those of you who've been longer-term shareholders will know that the IPO that was completed back in the autumn of 2017, the primary purpose of that IPO was to deliver that XF73 program. And it's fantastic that we came through that successfully. And of course, now we're looking ahead to phase 3 studies with that asset, which we'll discuss later. But alongside that, in last year, which was a tough year, of course, for many of us in terms of running a business, we made great progress also by bringing in another asset, an asset that's finished its phase 2 program called NTCD-M3. The NTCD stands for non-toxigenic Clostridioides difficile, and M3 is a specific strain of Clostridioides difficile, which is non-toxic, and it's used to really sort of line the gut colon and prevent toxic strains of C. difficile delivering these gut infections, which affect many patients and can lead to death. And we had great phase 2 data, which was delivered from this program a few years ago, but we've managed to acquire it, now looking to prepare for the phase 3 study to start next year. So 2 really attractive late-stage assets, both focused on infection prevention, which is a clear hook for the company and where we're heading. As I said, we also have an earlier pipeline. We've done very well attracting grant funding, including a significant grant supporting our COVID-19 program, which we'll touch on later. In terms of our funding position, we completed a funding at the IPO several years ago, and we also completed a funding close last December to acquire the NTCD-M3 program and also to extend our working capital through to the back end of 2022. So we're in a decent position cash-wise and very busy across the board in the company on our programs, which are summarised here. Hopefully you can see this clearly in terms of the pipeline slide. The 2 green assets are our M3 C. difficile program, but also Spore Cough, our COVID-19 program. Both of those are sort of in green because they're actually products which come from sort of the naturally occurring biotherapeutics. They're both bacterial strains, and they fit into this sector, which is described as sort of microbiome, whereby drug companies such as us are now looking to harness naturally occurring elements of the human microbiome to act as treatments, be they preventative or treatments, and it's a really hot area. So we're really quite excited that we moved into this space in 2020 alongside our really exciting XF platform, which is perhaps more classical organic chemistry drug development. And as you'll see, as we said earlier, we have 2 late-stage clinical assets, both of which have completed phase 2 and are heading towards phase 3s. M3 is further ahead because it's travelled further towards that phase 3 journey. We know what study we'll look to do. We've had discussions with the FDA, and the XF73 nasal program will catch up this year. And then earlier assets, a dermal program, our COVID project, and some research projects. So a pipeline that's really moved forward in the last 12 months, and in the future we're very excited about progressing with lead assets, but also there'll be further activity from that earlier pipeline. So just moving on now to talk about really what is our lead asset, which is NTCD-M3, which is looking to prevent the recurrence of this nasty gut infection caused by the C. difficile bacteria. Up to 29,000 deaths reported in the US a year, which is similar to the levels of deaths from prostate cancer. So a really significant healthcare problem. Of course, people who don't die can be very ill for several days with multiple episodes of diarrhea alongside their other healthcare conditions, because these are often elderly patients or frail patients. So it adds up to a significant cost in the US alone, multi-billions of healthcare costs, which is poorly treated and is named by the US authorities as the leading hospital-acquired infection. Obviously, maybe COVID has overtaken that recently, but a significant problem which is poorly treated. So a great opportunity for us to develop this drug. The bacteria themselves are found in the gut and in the soil, and when you have toxic strains, they're very easily cross-contamination happens. So you can imagine you get an outbreak of this in a hospital ward or a care home. Very nasty experience for the patients, the sufferers, and as we refer to, it can lead to high levels of mortality. So really important to bring forward new treatments such as NTCDM3. Current treatments are largely old antibiotics, which can do a job to knock back the initial toxic strains, but you have high levels of recurrence of the infection. And some of this is caused by the fact that the antibiotics, when they get into the gut, disrupt the gut lining, disrupt the microbiome, and these toxic strains are very opportunistic, and actually a disrupted microbiome is a perfect environment for toxic strains of C. diff to flourish. So antibiotic treatments, though, can have some initial success, are shown to lead to increasing levels of recurrence. And what we're looking to do is to stop that increasing recurrence. So we own the global rights. We acquired them, as I said, last autumn. It's completed phase 1 and phase 2 data with a very successful US biopharma company, which stopped the program when they got acquired by Shire, but it was a high quality program, and we've managed to pick it up from the discoverer of this asset, Professor Dale Girding, who's one of the world's leading experts in C. difficile, and it's targeting a significant market. And our time this year, with the funding we raised last autumn, is finalising the manufacturing and the preparation for the phase 3 study that we'll look to start in 2022. And that phase 3, we know, so we've had these discussions with the FDA. We know it's an 800 patient study with 550 active, 250 placebo patients. The endpoint is looking to reduce the rate of recurrence of C. diff infection. So these will be patients who've had one episode of C. difficile infection, and what we're looking to do is to stop that recurring. And there's very high levels of recurrence from that first episode of C. diff infection, so around 30% is quoted. So we're looking to reduce that, and the phase 2 data shows that we knock that back to about 5% recurrence rate with the best dosing. So if we can repeat that in the phase 3, we believe we will have class-leading data, and of course that will be the package that we'll be taken forward and filed with the FDA. But of course this is also a global opportunities in Europe, Asia, and elsewhere. So, as I said, there is some competition in this space, but some of the competition is built up from basically fecal matter, which is whereby some feces are taken and treated. Quite an extensive process to try and capture what's called healthy microbiome samples, where you have constituents of sort of what is described as healthy microbiome, which are then reintroduced to patients who have a damaged microbiome due to C. diff infections. However, this is limited to extreme cases of disease where patients have had multiple episodes of C. diff infection, effectively orphan drug status by the FDA. There are concerns over safety. It's also a very complicated process. Of course, it's relatively imprecise compared to the NTCDM3 approach, which is a single strain, single spore. So we believe we have clear advantages to those fecal matter approaches, and indeed other companies that are bringing forward sort of novel antibiotics. Again, we think the way to treat a disruption of the human microbiome is with another naturally occurring constituent of the microbiome, which is what we have with the NTCDM3 program. We can make it at a low cost. It's a fermentation process which we're scaling up this year. It's very stable, has a long shelf life. We take it as a simple solid dose pill with a glass of water, and therefore can be delivered, we believe, in the future as a sensibly priced drug and so our market penetration will be enhanced by its ease of use and also its relatively low cost to some of the other treatments that are potentially coming forward. So those are the slides on NTCDM3, which is our lead program. But now we have some slides on XF73, which reported great phase 2 data at the end of March, just a few months ago. And the background here to XF73, which has been the lead program for Destiny for a decade or more, is that it's well known that nasal carriage of this bacteria, Staphylococcus aureus, is the primary cause of post-surgical infections. And there's some grisly pictures here showing what can happen when patients after surgery do get infections caused by this bacteria. In simple terms, the bacteria is opportunistic and can jump from the nose into the open wound and will flourish there. And of course, if you do get an infection, it delays recovery. Longer hospital stays can indeed, in some cases, more severe cases, lead to obviously serious infections such as sepsis, can really impact on recovery from implants, etc. So there's a major concern across the world, and best practice is that you look to decolonize, i.e. kill these bacteria in the nose before major surgeries to reduce the risk of post-surgical infections. And a third of the world are carriers, regular carriers of staph in the nose. So a third of the people who are going in for operations across the world are at this greater risk of these post-surgical infections. That's the target market. You want to identify them and then decolonize their carriage of staph in the period of risk. And the period of risk, of course, is really when they're cut open and that wound is exposed. So a large market opportunity. And we know through discussions with US, European, UK, Japanese hospitals, best practice is you screen for this carriage and you should be looking to decolonize. The problem is we believe there is no great treatment to decolonize. What is used is an old antibiotic called mupirocin, but it has to be given 5 days in advance. It doesn't kill all strains of the bacteria, and indeed it does lead to resistance problems. So this area here is clearly, as you bring forward a new anti-infective preventative treatment, you want also to address the problem, the global problem of antimicrobial resistance, and the XF platform does that. We do not see levels of resistance generated from XF73 that you see in other anti-infective or antibiotic approaches, because it's a very fast, novel mechanism. So it kills the bacteria before it has a chance to morph or clone itself into a resistant form. So it's very novel. It's been recognized by the US authorities. We have QIDP status, which gives you extra exclusivity. QIDP stands for Qualifying Infectious Disease Product status. It's a hospital product, which gives us clarity on reimbursement, especially in the US, and it addresses the clear need. You know, as we've shown from the phase 2 data, which we'll come to, it rapidly kills the bacteria in the nose the day before surgery, so it's very easy to use. And then, of course, you reduce the bacterial load for the period of risk, which is as the operation is carried out. And this is a large market because there are tens of millions of operations that are carried out across the world. In fact, in the US alone, that are eligible for our target market to use XF73. So delivering that good phase 2 data has underpinned the clinical potential. And now, as we see here on the slide, which again, many will have seen from the phase 2 data, you see the primary endpoint was met. In fact, it was more than met. We sort of smashed through the target in terms of statistics with that great p-value, showed that it was highly statistically significant, the differentiation between course of treatment with XF73 compared to placebo. There is a very small placebo effect. If I blow my nose, I lose bacteria. So that's that effect. But really, these log scales, a massive effect showing that XF73 really does decolonize and kill the bacteria in the nose. In fact, many of the patients in the XF73 arm effectively were identified as having no Staphylococcus aureus in their nose. So total clearance of the bacteria during the period under review. So very, very strong data, and really putting us in a good position as we move towards looking at phase 3s. And this is a graphical representation of what happened. The red line obviously is the XF73 arm, and then the blue is placebo. And you see for that period of the real period of risk as you go into surgery is that you want to have as few of the bacteria as possible in the nose to limit the potential for any post-surgical infection. And it's well established through the literature that nasal carriage is the primary cause of these post-surgical infections. So alongside XF73 as a nasal gel, patients will still be having chlorhexidine body washes, armpits, groins, which are other sites that can where Staphylococcus aureus can live and of course cause infections. But nasal decolonization is number one priority of going into surgery. You can see that if you Google hospital protocols for what are they, decolonization, where it's UK, US hospitals, clearing the bacteria in the nose is a primary target for looking to decolonize patients prior to surgery. So what do we do now? So we've got great phase 2 data, but of course, as ever in this business, you've got to look forward. And the next challenge is clarifying the phase 3 plans. So we've started discussions with the FDA. We're also going to talk to Europe. And over the next few months, we will get further clarity on the exact nature of the studies, the clinical studies, both in terms of size, design, endpoints that will be needed for a phase 3 program for XS73. So you can see from that it's behind M3, our C. difficile asset. Well, we've had those meetings with the FDA, and we have clarity on what needs to be carried out in the phase 3 study. What we're looking to do with XS73 is to have the continuing discussions and talk to our scientific advisors, scientific advisory board, and to finalise the phase 3 plans for XS73. And of course, we'll update shareholders in the markets as soon as we get that clarity. But what we want to do is to be ready to start a phase 3 study in the second half of next year. And that's still feasible from where we are now. But obviously, at the same time, we're also looking to push forward the M3 program to start phase 3s next year. So really exciting time for the company to have 2 assets where we're talking about phase 3 studies. It really is a great place for a biotechnology company to be, talking about phase 3s following excellent phase 2 data. Just in terms of our other strategy regarding partnering, as you'd expect with a biotechnology company, we're looking to talk to partners who could be potentially development and commercial partners for both of our lead assets and also our earlier programs. We have one partner in China who joined us at the IPO, China Medical Systems. We have great relations with them, and they're doing their own work on the XF platform in China, and we'll update the markets on that in due course. But they're a very expert group, and we're looking to bring on board other partners this year and next year. You will have seen earlier in the year we appointed Dr. Stephanie Buick as Chief Business Officer. Obviously, we can't promise deals this year, but definitely we have a strong campaign to reach out to partners and bring on board, as I said, development and commercial partners to join us on that sort of phase 3 journey, especially with those 2 lead assets, which are very well positioned, given they both have very, very strong data and clear clinical and commercial opportunities. And news flow, slightly historical now. We reported obviously positive results from XS73 at the end of last quarter, and as we discussed, we're finalising plans for XS73. But also there's a huge amount going on NT-CDM3. We've seen, hopefully, the announcement yesterday, an update. It often gets forgotten in drug development, but the manufacturing of your drugs, the increasing levels of quality and analysis that are required as you go through from phase 1 to phase 2, and now we're heading towards phase 3. You really are scaling up and doing a level of work which is leading towards commercialization. That's not to be underestimated. You can't develop a drug just producing clinical data. You have to have a whole package, and there's some great work going on there with M3, and we'll get further updates during the year. But that was all laid out when we raised the funds, as it were, last November, December. This is what we'll be doing, and that's broadly going to plan. So that's great. And of course, that helps us having progress with M3 and also with XS73, helps us in terms of potential partnering deals. Obviously, what partners want to see is momentum in the programs, and us doing a strong job in terms of building those packages, which before you can start the phase 3 studies, you need those manufacturing packages. So that's really important. And as I said, it's often forgotten in this drug development process. And as we go into next year, looking to ideally start both studies. Obviously, M3 is more advanced, so perhaps it's clear that's the priority. But also bringing forward other programs. We haven't spoken about Sport, our COVID-19 collaboration, or our Doble program, but there's work going on there, and again, we'll announce updates in due course. And thereafter, heading through phase 3s, and obviously, really what we want to do, of course, definitely with both of our lead programs, is to deliver a product to market, and that will be a fantastic success. But the company is close to delivering that, which is a fairly unique position for a UK biotech company to be in. but we're really excited about the challenge and the opportunity, and look forward to working with new and existing shareholders as we move forward. And just in summary, hopefully it comes across, we are building a world-leading infection prevention company. We have two fantastic late-stage assets, really well positioned. We have some diversity in the pipeline. In the last year, we've brought in 2 new programs in that microbiome space. We still believe very strongly in the potential for the XF platform, but it's also great to have other assets in different areas alongside the XF platform, and decent funding position. And we believe prevention is better than cure, and Destiny Pharma's really well positioned to deliver assets to prevent infections. I'll stop there.
Neil, thank you very, very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab that's situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those questions already submitted, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this meeting, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we'll send you an email to notify you when they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company. Immediately after this presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Neil, I don't know if I could ask you please to open up the Q&A tab that's on your screen in front of you. And if I could ask you to start at the top, that was the pre-submitted question. And then obviously you've had a number of questions submitted, and perhaps I could ask you to read those out before giving a response, and I'll pick up from you at the end.
Okay, thank you. So a question regarding our COVID spore cough program, which is we're looking to develop as a nasal spray to stimulate the innate immune system in the nose. So this was awarded I think an £800,000 Innovate UK grant last year. We're working with our partner SporeGen there, and also the University of Liverpool, who are carrying out the current work. So that's ongoing under the grant plan. In terms of the work Liverpool are doing in both influenza and COVID-19 models. As we get data, we will make announcements. That's a preclinical program, so it's not in clinical trials. If it's successful, and it's planned to finish the end of this year, perhaps Q1 next year, depending on how it goes, that potentially could be ready to move into human studies next year. But obviously, what we need to do is to get the data from the ongoing research. But we're making good progress, and as I said, when we have clear results, we of course will make announcements. Next question it says that we're making good progress on our 2 lead assets, but the share price has fallen back, and this could be due to uncertainty over how the phase 3s will be funded. Can we reassure investors that funding won't see significant equity dilution? Well, I think we always say that we haven't got the funds to carry out the phase 3s. They will cost tens of millions, but our strategy there is to, as we've said, is to look to find partners to join us on that journey, and those partners potentially will bring cash to help fund or partly fund those phase 3s. We're also looking, perhaps we have the option of maybe prioritising one of the assets over another. So initially perhaps funding one phase 3, and maybe another phase 3 is purely partnered, as it were. And also, of course, yes, as a listed biotechnology company, it won't be any surprise to anybody that at some point we could also look at coming to the markets to raise equity, which obviously we have a duty to do that to respect existing investors, and issues such as dilution and pricing are important. At the moment, no specific plans have been laid. And as we make progress during this year, though, we will come back and update on sort of funding situations and of course how we are looking to fund the phase 3s. And for XF73, of course, we don't yet know exactly how large that study will be. So it's, though we have a sort of estimate, it's hard to talk with clarity over the exact cost of phase 3.
And Neil, I think it's fair to say that the weakness in the share price is probably also due to a number of sellers who might have invested much earlier on. If you remember, we did a funding round at 65p that made quite a significant profit, and suddenly some of those people have taken those profits. So I'm not sure it's quite due to any concerns about funding.
Yeah. There's also a question here, which is interesting, around a new pharma-backed fund, which is called the AMR Action Fund. So specifically addressing antimicrobial resistance. And yes, it's very well aligned with Destiny, the XF platform. It's also well aligned with the C. diff approach, because one of the challenges with antimicrobial resistance is the use of antibiotics. And of course, by using sort of microbiome approaches such as M3 and indeed Sporcard, you are not using antibiotics. So they stop or spare the use of antibiotics, which of course limits the opportunity for antimicrobial resistance. So we are sort of in touch with the AMR fund. I think it's fair to say, and you could look at their website, that they're not fully formed yet, but definitely exactly the sort of fund that we should be talking to, alongside reaching out to other funds who are interested in what we're doing. And we'll see if we make progress with them. But we'd like to think that, especially with the XF platform, of course, where it clearly addresses the problem of antimicrobial resistance, that you'd hope that a fund that's called the AMR Action Fund would be interested in what we're doing. As yet, we've made connections with them, but they're not fully formed, and we haven't had any detailed discussions. Obviously, we will update in due course if anything happens there. But I think what it is also is a validation of the set space we're in, and it underpins the recognition from PHARMA, which is also recognised by governments through regulatory initiatives, of the need for action in this space. It's called the AMR Action Fund. It's not called the Vaccine Action Fund. It's not called the Antibiotic Action Fund. It's called Antimicrobial Resistance Action Fund. So let's see what they do, but it'd be really interesting. They should be, of course, supporting companies like ourselves who are specifically addressing the problem of antimicrobial resistance. So very, very interested to talk to them. And as I said, we have got connections in, but they're not fully set up yet. In terms of partnering, a question here on partnering and timing, I think we've sort of addressed this. It's an ongoing process. It's clearly a target. It's difficult to, got to be careful about promising deals. In terms of where we would prefer our partners to be based, UK, US, or rest of the world, I think, to capture value, we maybe like to hold on to US for longer, but we're flexible, and it's about delivering value for shareholders and the best partner to get our lead assets to market. Because of course that's what we will get the large financial return, hopefully from long-term sales of M3 and XF73, a combination of milestones and royalties, what will deliver cash and value back to the company. So it's a balance between choosing a partner who will be there for the long term, and also of course delivering value for the company. And definitely we're open to global and regional deals, and you don't mention Japan or Asia there. We obviously have a China partner, but we're free to operate in Japan as well, which is a very interesting market for partnering, albeit it can be quite a slow process. But we're reaching out in all of those sectors, it's definitely, and we've had previous discussions, so we'll continue to look at that, and of course announce if and when we close any deals. So there's a question now about, are we able to prioritise XF73 versus M3 based on financial outcomes? Have we done projections regarding cost-benefit analysis? And the shareholder here, I assume it's a shareholder, prefers to progress XF73 due to AMR as opposed to M3. Well, I think in some ways we value both of them very highly. Obviously, M3 is further down that development pathway because it's had clarity from the FDA regulators on the phase 3 study. So in some ways it's ahead, but it doesn't mean that we're necessarily prioritising it as a value driver over XF73. We do our own internal net present value analyses, and we see clear multiples to the current market cap from each of those assets, let alone the combination. So we're very confident if we're successful with phase 3s, we have a really massive uplift in valuation coming. In fact, on value, if you look across to US companies just in the C. diff space who have assets which are phase 2 or maybe in phase 3s in the C. difficile space, some of the fecal matter companies, their valuations are $500 million to $2.5 billion, so they're 5 to 10 to 15 times more than Destiny's asset, and yet we believe our NTCD M3 asset stands comparison with them from the data it's produced, and it's a very smart way it works. So we have the potential to deliver significant value, and at the moment we value both assets, although as I said, in terms of timeline, M3 is further ahead. But I appreciate the point about antimicrobial resistance. XF73 is definitely in the sweet spot to address the problem of AMR. And as the next point, races, the G7 summit in Cornwall next week. Yes, I think you'll see there. And Matt Hancock has already done a short piece to camera as a warm up for G7, talking around COVID-19. But I think the second healthcare issue was named in that press release was antimicrobial resistance. So we'll see what comes out next week. But previously, antimicrobial resistance has been G20, G7, WHO. It's at the top table of all of these discussions. So there is a global problem, and companies like Destiny are looking to address it. So we're really well positioned and look forward to further government support, but also through the AMR Action Fund. It's really good to see pharma companies coming to play and looking to put money to work. You know, the AMR Action Fund, I think, is well over $1 billion now. They're looking to invest in clinical stage assets in this space. A question about, are we considering a Nasdaq listing? I think, yes, it's the board have reviewed that as an option, and we'll work with advisors. We'll keep track of what could be the opportunity there. It's obviously you look across evaluations, and there are some fantastic examples of companies that have done very well. We also know from our experience there are some companies that sometimes have struggled. So streets aren't necessarily paved with gold, but definitely we continue to look at it. And as the question says here, for late stage assets looking towards phase 3s, we really think we could get good traction in Nasdaq, but at the right time. It's not something that will happen in the short term. A question from a long-term shareholder. Good to have somebody who's been with the company for 20 odd years, and the company is just over 20 years old. So thank you for your long-term support. It has taken time, though Exit 73, of course, wasn't there at the start. Bill Love, the founder of the team, developed the platform, and Exit 73, only went into the clinic, several years after formation. Yes, I'm sure the pace of progress at times before I joined was partly due to maybe challenges with funding, but the fact is the intellectual property life is still strong, and in some ways you could say that actually maybe the timing is right now with this increased interest in antimicrobial resistance. And of course, though it's taken time, the good thing is we've delivered fantastic phase 2 data. So the journey's been worth it, and investment made to date is beginning to deliver clear returns, and we're now entering that period where hopefully we get into phase 3s, where it's only a few more years, and potentially there could be a new product filing, which is, as I keep saying, is a fantastic success for a UK or for any biotechnology company.
I think it's also worth saying to that long-term shareholder, myself, I've been a shareholder for more than 20 years, and the results of the XF73 trial are beyond what we could have imagined, when we were aiming for about an 87% reduction and got nearly a 95% reduction in the bacteria. So it was a really stunning result after all that time. So.
Neil, I think I might jump in if I may. You've addressed every question that's been submitted by the attendees today, so thank you for all those questions that have been submitted. I know investor feedback is important to you. Perhaps I could just ask you for a few closing comments, and then what I'll do is I'll redirect investors to provide you with that feedback.
Yes, well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for attending and your continued interest, and look forward to interacting again soon. And please, if there are any questions, submit them to Mark or come direct to the company, and we'll do our best to answer them. But thank you for your support, and we'll look forward to working hard and delivering more success later in the year.
That's great. Thank you very, very much indeed. Could I please ask attendees not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the board can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the board of Destiny Pharma, I'd like to thank you for attending today's annual general meeting. That now concludes today's meeting. Good afternoon, or should I say good morning to you all. Thank you.